Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the tangata whenua of the land that we are currently on, the original custodians of Tamaki Makaurau and Aotearoa, and I'd like to acknowledge that the rest of us are here as guests. One of the most potent transformations that we can witness is when a woman begins to converse with the many voices and ancestral memories she holds within her form. This is when she begins to understand the personal language held within her devastation and divinity. When she begins to surrender to, as well as guide it, this is when she moves towards becoming fully realized. And a woman fully realized is a woman fully equipped to take on the complexity of this world. We all arrive here with some sort of inherited or learnt internal conflict. Conflict, in the way that I like to use that word, doesn't necessarily mean something negative. Conflict can be an intangible tension. It can be an ongoing conversation or a question that lies alongside your backbone and keeps you up all night. Conflict can be a life work presented as a human puzzle that we don't always have the means to be able to solve. But for human beings, answers haven't always been our strong point. And as an artist, I am more interested in unraveling physically the journey towards the resolution rather than just the resolution itself. One of the conflicts that I have within me in my work isn't actually anything that special. I am one of many people in this country and in this world who is navigating an ever-evolving identity within their diaspora. We are in an era of disconnection within an era of hyperconnection. For me, and for context, I am Fijian European. As far as I know, I could be other things, I'm not quite sure. I identify as being mixed race, but as I like to say it, I am a physical meeting ground for many bodies of water. I was born and raised in Tamaki Makaurau, Aotearoa. I have 3 siblings, Shaquille, Kalisha, and Josiah, and we were raised by our mother, Kerry, in a household that had multicultural understandings, multi-belief systems, and had its own share of joy and turmoil. The absence of our father, Timothy, he was our embodied idea of Fiji, and with his absence, it was deeply felt throughout all of our lives. Our sense of identity, and actually just our sense of knowing, was constantly shifting and moving and under scrutiny and falling away from us. I was deeply loved, but I was also going to war with myself every single day. Many Pacifica nations, as well as indigenous nations across the board, have an ingrained understanding that wherever you go in the world, you always return home. You always come back to the village, back to the motherland. I believe that this understanding is still present in young Pacifica people, even if they don't have the tools to identify it, regardless of whether or not they were raised within or beyond the reef. We all feel this instinct call to return, to connect, to communicate deeper. But sometimes that call can manifest as an insatiable void, or as an impulse to continue to recreate your identity over and over and over again from scratch. It is the very human need to belong and to understand where you belong to. But if you're navigating this on land that does not belong to you, and you try to build something that kind of feels like home, sometimes it can be taken away from you, undermined, and devalued. I heard this call from a really young age. My mother, who was Palangi, she was not allowed to learn Fijian dialects, but she learned te reo, and she used it throughout our childhood, so we grew with an understanding of whose land we were on. We also understood that traditional language, customs and protocol and traditions, they were connected to people and land in a sense of belonging. But what I knew was that one of the tongues that I belonged to was missing. I instead spoke with English, a tongue that had built so much of its legacy from devouring other languages and cultures and communities. I was very confused by this language shift, and I didn't know how to push it forward. This is where my mother comes in. The magic of my mother is that she was incredibly aware of what she could not teach us. So instead, she taught us to focus on what we knew instead of what we didn't know. And what I knew was my body. I knew dance. I already knew a physicalized ritual in itself. So I found my creative outlets. I used movement as a means to channel different images and beliefs and ideas. I used choreographic tools found within contemporary dance technique. I used the manipulation of the English language through poetry. At first, I thought that by following this need to creatively physicalize all of my internal dismemberment, that I would find something definitive, I would find proof that I belonged to something measurable. But what I found was not what I expected. What I found was a different kind of intangible hybrid language. And it was built, yes, through modern mediums, but it had an intrinsic connection to ancestral memory. And behind this hybrid language, I found a door to my ancestors. As I developed my own sense of physical ritual as an artist, I began to understand how this language would filter in throughout my work. I was also starting to transfer it into my solo work. My most recent solo work, called A World with Your Wound in It was starting to speak to the connections between my earth and my body, and the bodies of my sisters, both locally and globally. I began to track patterns, notice similar shifts and changes, and I began to translate all that information into smaller conflicts that I put within my body to be able to understand it and reconcile with it. This process of becoming a mirrored map, it was a translation of an ageless belief that the many manifestations of a woman's form, they are tapu and they are sacred. And that form is connected to the form of the earth. They cannot be separated. They speak to one another and they understand one another as well. As a young woman and as an artist, I don't claim to have all the answers, and I don't claim to know anything more than anyone else. I don't believe humans have the answers to most things anyway. But what I do know is that through instinct and through a calling and through guidance and through training and exploration, I've been able to utilize these mediums to be able to understand this complicated but beautiful internal conflict I have and to understand the world around me and also the conflict of others. Regardless of the terminology and confusion surrounding any concrete diaspora, I have followed and chased all my creative callings back to my own body every single time, because this is the land that I was indigenous to first. Here, I have found another way home. Here, I have been able to answer the call of my ancestors, and here is somewhere that I will always belong. And that is something that cannot be measured, only witnessed. Thank you. Now I'm gonna perform a solo excerpt from a work called Orchids by Sarah Foster Sproul.